Hello, I want to say a little more about the attack on the two gay women in a London bus last week, because I had quite a few interesting responses. And we'll start by getting out of the way the more personal ones. It struck me as rather odd that the people who were supposed to be defending the females in this particular situation thought it appropriate to make the same sort of sexual comments towards me as those lads were making to those women, which just shows you that social justice warriors have no logic. Okay, but apart from that, there are a few other responses which I would like to try and get out of the way before I go on to talking about somebody to whom I shall refer to as Tony Randall, because July the 4th is an important date, and one of the reasons I'm not coming out with the proper name is because I'm worried about this video being just disappeared because I'm talking about the wrong person. So remember that. Tony Randall, July the 4th. You can go to his webpage. Anyway, let's get on to the main event. To my surprise, one of the most common reactions to that story was one of disbelief that it didn't happen in the first place. Well, look, it did. It must have done. Every bus in London has CCTV. The police will have seen the video and they would have seen something happened because they made arrests. Now, it's entirely possible they arrested a bunch of innocent bystanders just to look good. But really, I don't think so. So, something happened. Who started the fight? Well, that's another story. And no doubt it will come out sooner or later, or it will perhaps just evaporate into a sort of nothingness. Yeah. But then the other thing was people were saying that the blood isn't the right colour. Look, internet, browsers, anything on the computer, nothing is the right colour. You're very lucky if stuff comes out true to shade, really, honestly. And I know that because I wear lipstick, and very frequently I'm wearing a lipstick of a colour that actually matches my shirt. And when I've taken the video, it doesn't match my shirt at all. So really saying it's the wrong colour, you can't say that. And apart from anything else, the blood might have had its consistency changed by being mixed with saliva, mucus from the nose, tears. I mean, they're great big strong women, but I'll bet you one of them was crying anyway. So you can't use the colour of the blood unless you're right there on the spot and can see it with your own eyes, not through a camera. All right, now what's next? Let's see, what do I have on my notes here? The other thing was, yes, the quietness. Well, it's true. We're not hearing much about the boys, and a few people took me to task because I didn't think they were ethnic minority, and a few people did make several points that have sort of convinced me that it's at least a distinct possibility. However, British law is very strict about not identifying minors. Now, it's entirely possible that some of them were minors and maybe one or two were over 18 and could be identified. However, a case could be made by a competent lawyer that you can't identify the older boy without exposing the identity of the younger ones. And so they could make a case for keeping a lid on the whole thing. Now, as we know, this law can be selectively applied. And these sorts of laws, which you might call, depend on the discretion of the police. For instance, the one involving Tony Randall, who was accused of jeopardizing a court case by reading out on his mobile phone something that was actually on the BBC website. That was a good example of selective application. However, that's the situation as it is. And the fact that we don't know who the boys are doesn't necessarily mean that they are an ethnic minority. Although, yeah, could be. Well, as a matter of fact, this video here is of a front page, a page in the Daily Mirror, in which an attack of a sort is recorded on a woman who was going on holiday, and she was stuck in a Ryanair plane with these louts. No trouble about identifying them because they're of age, but even so, I'm sure the Daily Mirror was only too glad to put that picture up because at least it was a bunch of white guys. I suspect that the reason that these two lesbians on the bus got such a lot of, traction in the press must have to do with the fact that one of them works for The Guardian. It wouldn't surprise me at all if a team or one or two people or one or two of their friends from The Guardian encouraged them in their interviews to give some sort of political message at the same time. Look, you've got the ear of the country. Why don't you use it? Do some good. Criticise Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, of all things. And it just shows you what an agenda the press, a part of the press, have. When they go for Boris Johnson, not yet even in charge of the Conservative Party, although it looks at the moment very much as if he will be. And they are talking about a dangerous situation, blaming it on the atmosphere that Boris Johnson has created when he is not even in power, but who is in power is Sadiq Khan. And he's the guy they really should be criticising, but that doesn't fit the Guardian's agenda. And frankly, this woman going to Spain on holiday in her Ryanair plane, that doesn't fit the Guardian agenda either, does it? Because apparently she wasn't doing anything. And by the way, neither were the crew. They were just letting it happen. And to date, the Guardian front page looks like this. Nothing at all about Ms. Muldoon, is there? I have no idea why they were acting that way, but it appears pretty horrific. So, what's going on? Well, let's get back to the fact that people don't trust the story. They don't trust the story because they reckon these women had an agenda, and they reckon the Guardian had an agenda, and they reckon the BBC had an agenda. And, frankly, I reckon they all had an agenda as well. But I find it very disturbing that we so distrust the press, which are the organ of democracy. Or that is the organ of, I suppose that is the organ of democracy. Well, take your pick. I don't know whether you remember, but there was a chap called George Easton. He was, I think, an editor, he was certainly a journalist on a hitherto very prestigious magazine called The New Statesman. He interviewed Roger Scruton, and fortunately there was a secondary recording being made at the same time. When George Easton took the recording of his interview back, he cut and spliced and pasted and switched round. So it made it appear as if Professor Scruton, an eminent philosopher and one of the great minds of this century, it made him look like some sort of a homophobic racist. And then he was caught drinking champagne from a bottle to celebrate that he'd had him sacked. And then the other recording came out and all was made clear. He was lying. He was pursuing an agenda. He was making himself untrustworthy and his magazine untrustworthy and tainting all other magazines. And it's not only the news. I heard an interview with Tony Randall in which he said that children in school were being given questionnaires, quizzes to do for homework along the lines of, how many times has Tony Randall been in trouble with the law? Yeah, really. I might be able to put the link up to that interview in the description. Other stuff like, I don't know, it was something like, hasn't Tony Randall been proved to be a violent man? Stuff like that. But remember that these teachers who are setting these quizzes are getting their information from the press, from the BBC, from The Guardian, and between them, they are actually kicking the feet out from underneath the democracy which we need to run a civil society. It really is very frightening indeed. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe, and if you wish to donate, click the Subscribe Star link where you can make a one-off payment or set up a regular contribution, or I have a PayPal account at grannyopteryx@gmail.com. Till next time.